follows an extract from my book Fête Fatale, available from Amazon. Chapter 13, Part 1. Emma and Henrietta took the children to Beth's as arranged, and then together they walked through the village to Jean's house. I know that we're supposed to be making use of this opportunity and that we need to keep our eyes open, but I think we need to make sure that the priority of our going to Jean's today is really to help her. Do you agree, Hetty? Asked Emma. Yes, I do. Your mum was quite clear that our intentions should be genuine, but we were to be wise to the opportunity. I think it has a more wholesome feel about it if we think about it that way. I'm not just saying that to make myself feel better. I don't think we're doing anything shabby, but it's best to define the grey areas, don't you think? You're right. If, after a morning's hard work, we've nothing to show for our efforts but a more organised Jean, then so much the better. Exactly. Well, here we are. Let's roll up our sleeves and get stuck in. Emma rang the doorbell and they were quickly inside the spacious hallway planning their morning's work. I've had a think about how we might best work things this morning, said Henrietta. What do you think, Jean, if Emma gets on with the clearing out and bagging up while I do a bit of my usual cleaning? It's a while since I did any of my usual chores, and once I get them done, I can help Emma. That sounds like a good idea. I'm so grateful to you girls. I really haven't the energy for any more crawling into cupboards and climbing to the top of wardrobes. John would normally do the heavy lifting, though I suppose that if he were here to do it, then the job wouldn't need doing at all. I guess that's the way of it now, said Jean. I'll make sure that I'm on hand so you can come and ask me if you're not sure of anything. As far as I can tell, I've moved away any items that I definitely want to keep, so it should just be wholesale bagging up. The next hour or so was spent industriously. Jean sat knitting in the lounge as Emma cleared out and bagged up clothes, belts, shoes and other paraphernalia from John's separate bedroom. Henrietta polished and vacuumed throughout the house, humming as she worked. At 11 o'clock, Jean put aside her knitting and called the girls into the kitchen for a drink. She made a pot of tea and put out a plate of biscuits which soon needed replenishing. Do you have any paracetamol, Jean? I think I've got a headache coming on, said Emma. Oh, I hope you haven't overdone it and tired yourself out. I'm so sorry, but I don't have any at all. I'm afraid that I never take any tablets and neither did John. You must go home if you're not well, said Jean. Emma brushed aside Jean's concerns. Oh, it's nothing really. It's hardly there at all. In fact, that cup of tea and some biscuits have set me to rights again. I'll have another cup out of the pot and then I'm raring to go again. How's your knitting coming on? Jean walked into the lounge to fetch her knitting to show to the girls, and as soon as her back was turned, Henrietta threw Emma an inquiring glance. In reply, Emma wrinkled her brow and shrugged her shoulders. Further explanation was impossible as Jean came bustling into the kitchen with her arms full of Aran wool in various stages of completion. She explained that she was knitting a large cabled throw, and the younger ladies were eager and generous with their praise. Jean blushed with the enjoyment of their approval, obviously unaccustomed to such admiration, and proceeded to try and explain the cabling method. As the only employee of the group, Henrietta felt that she had finished her stipulated break and now needed to get back to work. Not wanting to miss out on the knitting lesson, she decided to tackle what job she could in that room and began to clean out the fridge as they chatted. Running a bowl of hot water, she tipped a splash of distilled white vinegar into the bowl. After emptying the contents of the fridge onto the kitchen surface, she dipped the cloth into the bowl of water and vinegar and then sprinkled bicarbonate of soda onto the cloth before beginning to wipe down the shelves. She wiped the shelves with a dry cloth and placed a clean piece of kitchen towel under where the milk bottle stood before restoring the contents of the fridge back to their rightful place. I'm not sure that you're looking after yourself properly, Jean. It's not like you to have such an empty fridge. These contents have hardly changed since I last cleaned before the fête. I know that cooking for one hardly seems worth the effort. I know it well. but you really do need to eat properly and look after yourself." Jean looked up at Henrietta and gave her a sheepishly embarrassed look. "You know, if you really can't stand the thought of just cooking for yourself all the time, you ought to make a daily lunch date at Eileen's tea rooms. Her prices are very reasonable, and it's quite acceptable to sit on your own if you don't want to make it into a social occasion. I understand that you might not want to be off on a jolly every time you want to eat your lunch. I can't afford to go very often, but sometimes when Toby's in school I treat myself to lunch out, and I enjoy going on my own. People soon get used to the fact that you like to sit by yourself, and they soon stop even noticing. It's just a matter of establishing a pattern. I find that I feel less conspicuous if I take a book to read, but it's not strictly necessary. You could take your knitting, although I suppose you can't really knit and eat." "What a good idea, Hetty. It'd get you out of the house each day too. You should really consider it, Jean. You could have a standing reservation and get privileged treatment. I'm quite jealous. You need never peel a potato again if you didn't want to. All you'd need to worry about is your breakfast and a light tea or supper in the evening. How civilised," said Emma. "It'd be a waste of this fantastic kitchen though," said Henrietta. "You'd have to have a mammoth baking session now and then, when the mood strikes, just to justify this magnificent cooking range." "You're right, I've not been eating proper meals. There's something in what you say. You girls make it sound quite appealing. I've not been out, as I'm not really in the mood for sociable outings just now, and I certainly wouldn't want that every day. I'd never considered going on my own merely to eat." "If you say that you do that sometimes, Henrietta, then I suppose it must be all right. I'd never thought of it that way. I think it's just a matter of confidence. Once I've been, I imagine it would soon be accepted without comment. I might just try if I dare," said Jean. "Of course you dare. Hide behind a knitting pattern or a book." At the back of the fridge she found a jar of Jean's prize-winning rhubarb and rose-petal jam. She opened the lid to check the rim and noticed signs of mould forming on the side of the jar. Wiping her finger across the lid, she tasted the jam. "This jam's going off, Jean," said Henrietta. "What shall I do with it? Shall I just scrape away the mould?" "I'd forgotten that it was there. That was John's jam," said Jean. "I'd better throw it away. I don't want to eat it now. I've blamed myself for John's death, thinking that in giving him a treat I'd actually caused him to die by upsetting his diabetes. Dr. Wainwright tells me that it's utter nonsense, but you do dwell on such things, don't you?" Jean took the jar from Henrietta, and after tipping the remnants into the waste bin, she rinsed the jar and set it to dry on the drainer. "Oh, Jean," said Emma, "nobody ever sticks to their diet as they should. You really need to stop thinking like that." "You're right, I'm sure," said Jean. "Even so, I'm sick of the stuff. I can't believe that Darcy hadn't got the guts to choose a proper first place and gave a joint first prize at the fête. That's worse than coming second, don't you think?" "I just thought that both yours and Phoebe's jams were top-notch, and they both deserved first place. I honestly think that was the case, and Darcy was really brave to stick to her guns in saying so," said Emma, as she stood up to resume sorting and bagging duties upstairs. By the end of the morning, the two younger ladies had made a thorough job, and Jean's hallway was now full of bags of clothes stashed in piles. "I'll get Nathaniel to call round in his truck later today, if you can cope with these for a few hours. That's upstairs finished, I think," said Emma. "There isn't much more left to do. In fact, I'd say you're almost done, apart from some little bits and bobs which you'll need to look through first to check if there's anything you want to keep," said Henrietta. "Please thank Nathaniel for collecting all of these bags. If you take them to the church hall, they'll decide what's best to send where. As there's too much to carry now, will you be walking straight back to Beth's?" said Jean. "Yes, we'd better go and rescue her from the kids, or vice versa," said Henrietta. "If you don't mind, I think I'll walk with you. I'm going to strike while the iron's hot and go to the Blue Willow tea rooms for my lunch. You two can bolster my courage as we walk, said Jean. The last thing that Emma and Henrietta wanted just now was Jean's company. They had so much that they wanted to talk about after their morning's work, but that would now have to wait. Nevertheless, they were glad that Jean had taken their advice and was acting on it so quickly. Good for you, said Henrietta. Take a book or something just for the first time. I found that it really helped me. Nobody else cares, I'm sure, but it just covered my shyness. I'm so glad that you understand. I'll take this book of knitting patterns as I want to figure out the next pattern panel. I feel quite rebellious at the thought of reading and knitting at the same time. I was always taught that it was bad manners to take a book to the table, said Jean. Oh, you rebel, said Emma. The three of them walked happily towards Main Street, and then Emma and Henrietta continued to Beth's house. The distance left was too short to allow any lengthy conversation, and they didn't want to linger and be later than they already were in picking up the children. It's a shame that Jean walked back with us, though I'm glad she'll be having a proper meal today. Well done you for spotting that she wasn't shopping or eating properly, said Emma. I'm surprised at her, really. I thought she'd be more practical than that. We've obviously got plenty to talk about and to think over, but it'll have to wait until we all meet together to discuss all of our findings. What was all that funny business about you having a headache? I know that you carry the contents of a chemist's shop wherever you go. The answer to that will have to wait, I'm afraid. I can see Mum with Toby and Primrose walking to meet us. Beth had been in the garden with the children and had seen Emma and Henrietta as they walked towards the house. She had quickly picked 2 bunches of mismatched flowers, and these were now in the clutches of 2 pairs of small grubby hands. The children were now running to give their posies to their mum. Simultaneously, Emma and Henrietta stooped to catch a running child. Appropriate smiles and sniffing gestures were directed to the proffered posies, and they thanked Beth for her kind attention to the children and for the flowers. An inquiring glance from Beth was understood. I don't think our efforts have been entirely wasted this morning. Jean is nicely organised at home and, thanks to Henrietta's powers of observation, she is probably eating her first decent meal since John died. Henrietta sent her to Eileen's tea rooms to make sure she has some quality food. We definitely need to go there ourselves as soon as we can, said Emma. She gave special emphasis to the latter part of her sentence. Without need for further comment, Beth gave a decisive nod, fully understanding the implication. After a round of hugs, Emma and Henrietta took charge of their own children and they parted company. For the full book of Fête Fatale, available in paperback or as an ebook, follow the link in the cards in the description box or find details on my website at sharonbill.com. Thanks for listening.